So you took the plunge and started a new Sandbox campaign, and your players had a lot of fun defeating a dungeon, saving a town, finding all the threads that they're going to follow during this campaign, and now you're wondering, how do I weave that all together and keep this thing going? Don't worry, I wouldn't abandon you, unless there's zombies, or treasure, or a new Zelda game, maybe for a new Sanderson novel. Okay, there's a lot of things that I would abandon you for, but I'm here right now. Hi, I'm James. I've been a dungeon master for over 28 years, and on this channel I talk about the things that I think about, plan, and plot for my tabletop role-playing games. If you like that kind of stuff, then there's buttons down there for like and subscribe. Clicking them helps out the channel. Today I'm thinking about that quicksand in the middle of our sandbox. The middle. Once the sandbox is underway, the players are picking and charting a course to which things they want to follow, but we're the ones that decide which additional threads we're going to tie to whatever they're doing now. It's not less preparation or less effort than a linear campaign. It's different preparation, different effort. That's the artistry.
But these aren't rules, they're guidelines. Like in art, you can toss out the guidelines, but you're going to get more consistent results, better results, if you understand what the guidelines were trying to accomplish in the first place. If you've got your own suggestions on how you run a sandbox, please drop them down in the description. But for the love of God, include the circumstances under which whatever you're doing worked. Knowing that a tool exists is all well and good, but you kind of need to know when to apply it. Otherwise, you end up trying to paint like Starry Night with watercolors. Maybe you could get there, but you are really working against the medium. The sandbox mentality, if you will, is to set up your tools so that you can improvise the story, the adventure in the moment, and then use your notes of what happened to go back and plan to improvise in the next moment. I don't need to have a fully defined linear narrative in advance. A sandbox assumes that we will get an engaging narrative when players pursue things that they care about. Because why would they want to talk to someone or do things that bore them? It does, however, mean that a randomly encountered assassin might suddenly need depth, personality, motives, ties to a larger plot at the drop of a hat. They are a new thread from which to weave your story. We call the individual stories within larger works threads. I find it helpful to group them by what's driving them. There are things that I think of as player threads, reactive threads, and world threads. Player threads are things that the player wants to achieve for their character, but the rest of the world largely does not care until the player has already taken action to achieve that goal. Say that the players want to have a castle for a bastion, they want to make a magical artifact, or they want to start a thieves guild. I'm going to provide opportunities in the game for them to pursue whatever their goal is, of course, but I'm not going to go out of my way to make sure it happens. It's kind of up to the players to take initiative to make sure these kind of personal goals are achieved. If they go into a vampire's castle, slay the vampire, and then march out of the castle, that was their opportunity to take the castle, make it their bastion, and declare themselves king. I'm not going to chase after them saying, "What the hell? I put the castle there for you." I can knock on the door and say, "Hi, I'm Opportunity," but I kind of see it as the player's job to open the door and take the opportunity provided to them. Reactive threads are in response to something the players have done or chosen to care about, and they kind of require the world to talk back, usually through an NPC. Imagine a player is trying to find their long-lost mother, they join a thieves guild, or they make enemies of a cult. Those would be reactive threads. When they stop in a town, I need to decide, does somebody in this town know something about the lost mother? What about the cult? Are they active here? Have they been lurking the shadows long enough and it's time to bring them back forward? Or maybe they've outstayed their welcome in the campaign. These things move, but only in response to the players actually choosing to look into the box and care about them. So largely, I don't worry about it until I need them or the players ask about them. As opposed to world threads that are things that the world cares about and is kind of going to expect the players to give a crap about them. These are things related to world building, the politics of the world, or whatever the player's nemesis might be up to. In my campaign, for example, my players chose from a list of 4 options at the start that they wanted to be in a campaign about hunting demons in an era of civil war. It's very anime coded. When you start your sandbox, you want a bunch of loose ideas, people, places, things, all that could be reasonably connected to whatever the adventure is that kicked off your campaign. And as you go further into the campaign, you're going to start connecting a few of these ideas together as they chase down a threat, but don't overconnect. You want to wait to see what they're interested in, and when they follow something, connect other things that they're interested in, while leaving some room to add new ideas or maybe new consequences from things that the players chose to do to show the world changing around the players, because that's one of the charms of the sandbox. The world responds to what the players are doing. Let's say that the players decide that they're going to go deal with this cult that's been operating in the area. But one of the players also said that they thought Lord Cadmus might have some nefarious ideas about what to do with their local population. We'll say that Cadmus is in league with the cult. That's one thread. But how are they connected to the cult? The players also said that they wanted to hunt demons down, so maybe this cult serves demon lords. It's classic, and they're actually controlling Lord Cadmus. That's interesting. What happens if you kill him? Okay, that's 2 threads down. Maybe within the cult leader's notes, there's some indication that they are here because they thought this might be where they could find that player's lost mother. That's 3 threads. What does a cult care about some player's lost mother? I have no idea. We'll solve that when it's time. I'm setting up blocks, bits and pieces, threads that could become a story that is different depending on what the players do. If you're lucky, at least a few of your players will have some ambition for your world. If you're even luckier, they will verbatim tell you exactly what they would like to get out of the game. But many times you will not be so lucky. Most players won't even know what it is that they would like out of the game. That's perfectly normal. Most people don't understand what it is they like, let alone are capable of explaining to somebody else why that thing is liked. They like it. I don't know art. I know what I like. And that's actually good for us because it's easier to work the illusion if they don't understand how it works. But as dungeon masters, like our cousins in books, movies, video games, it is better if we understand how these things are put together and what our players like so that we can better engage them. When your players say something like, "Oh my God, this is my new favorite NPC," or "What was going on with that witch?" Or "Can we spend another hour describing each of the rooms in our mansion?" Those are things that you want to make note of and bring them back later in the adventure. Don't wait for them to grab you by the shoulders and say,
"I would very much like it if you feature that witch more in the story, please."
It is kind of surface level engagement, but we need surface level engagement. If you went to see a Star Wars film and didn't have at least some of spaceships, blasters, cool helmets, lightsabers, and an underdog fight against overwhelming odds, then it probably doesn't feel like Star Wars. And there are people that you can just give more surface level to, and they will be totally thrilled. If you have a friend that will 100% every Assassin's Creed game, then just give them whatever it is that they like. More combat, more melodrama, more fireball, and they will be thrilled. But for many of us, there's something underneath the surface level that is what really engages us in a piece of media. There are many films and games that will copy a great piece of film or video game, and then you leave wondering why it didn't hit the same as the original. And that's because they didn't understand what was underneath the surface. And for that, your psychic powers come in useful. We're not looking for something that they say they like, we're looking for something that occupies space in their heads. When an adventure is done, what is their first inclination to return to? Is there an NPC that they seem to really enjoy? Is there an NPC that they totally loathe? Have they spent 10 minutes arguing about why a villain did something when they could just be moving on to the next room? Are they worried about consequences of something specific, even though that seems totally unrelated to the current adventure? Any of those things are a sign that something has moved beyond just a piece on a game board and is now something that is real to them. And you've struck gold. Whatever they're emotionally invested in, that is the real adventure. In character-driven RPGs, there's this kind of practice where the player and the dungeon master will collude together over a specific story moment that they would like to have happen and use it as a kind of grand reveal to shock all the members of the players. In a sandbox, I think that's kind of a stolen opportunity. In the language of threads, this is kind of a reactive thread, except you're not looking for a reaction from the rest of the game world. You're looking for a reaction from the rest of the players. So you, the dungeon master, and the player start positioning pieces together to try to get this specific moment. I'd call that orchestrated gameplay. We're trying to dictate beforehand how a certain story beat is going to go, and then we're trying to guide events towards that reveal. And that can be a lot of fun. You're just bringing some of that orchestrated, pre-formulated mindset into the sandbox. And a sandbox, by its nature, isn't orchestrated. It's more like RPG jazz. You're improvising something in the moment based on your knowledge of story, character, setting, game system, and the other players are either going to back you up while you do whatever you're doing, or they in turn get to riff on it. Maybe not right now, but if the players know that this thing is out there lurking on the horizon, waiting for them to eventually be revealed, then they can start to make some decisions and choices for their own characters, in position to either support or oppose whatever this grand reveal is. And this is a sandbox, so who knows? By the time that it does come up, it may turn out that a character that was going to oppose it goes, you know what? Given what's happening, what you've said, I kind of feel like my character would go along with it. Because this is an organic thing where everything is moving all the time, and the players are together with the dungeon master working to figure out how the story unfolds for these characters. Everyone, including the other players, are your co-conspirators. I know I said guidelines and not rules, but guideline of 3 does not sound as cool as rule of 3, so here we are. During the mid-game, when your players are running around, getting up to no good, starting trouble in the neighborhood, aim for 3 threads in play at any given time. When your players decide to chase after the cult that the cleric created and then regretted, maybe there is something powerful inside that cathedral of evil for the player that was looking to make an artifact. And for the player that was really interested in hunting demons, maybe you can weave the demons in somewhere. Are they controlling the cult? Did they inspire the cult? Especially at the end of the thread, like for me, it was when the bard finally found her mother. I want to start reintroducing some of the other threads that the players were interested in. The reason that I like 3 choices is that with 2 choices, players tend to think of one as the good choice and one as the bad choice. And then they argue about it until one side just gives up. They never really look beyond what you've presented them. They may think that you, the dungeon master, have a preference and that is the one that they should choose. If you give them 3 choices, it's harder for them to evolve into this good-bad dichotomy, and they start looking for combinations. Can I use thread A to solve thread C? Is that a secret thread D option? And you've opened their mind to creative solutions without overwhelming them with 7 different hooks and a bad case of decision paralysis. Ideally, I want to mix across the types of threads and use threads that different players are interested in. Like maybe there's a map to a dragon cave that is for one player's reactive thread, and they find notes on ancient rites that is for one player's player thread. Maybe I want to follow up on a world thread and introduce the idea that the cult, the dragons, and the demons have formed a temporary alliance, and they're going to try to summon Tiamat. If the players decide that the randomly encountered guard or goblin is their new best friend, if you did obnoxious voice for a gnome while you were playing, or now the players died to protect her, then I'm sorry, you're stuck with it now. The good news is the players have decided to care about something. 90% of the time it is an NPC. The other 10% of the time it is either that tavern that they forcibly acquired or their new favorite magic item. See a particular ranger and her magic broom. If the players care about something, you've been given a button. Use it responsibly. It's okay for bad things to happen to the NPC. It's okay for the villain to threaten the NPC. It's even okay for the NPC to die. But you shouldn't be doing it casually. You need to telegraph that this NPC that the players care about is in danger. And I think that danger should come as a consequence to the player's actions. And it should be a kind of equivalent exchange, at least in a kind of villainy mindset. And if I thought that there was a risk that the player was missing the telegraph, then I would absolutely break the kind of neutral DM character just to make sure to clarify.
Just so we're clear, if you choose to chase after your mom to stop her from opening the portal that will let Demogorgon into the world, instead of going to slay the dragon, then the dragon has threatened to barbecue the orphanage. The dragon is going to follow through on that threat.
This isn't railroading, it's consequences. They did kill the dragon's hatchlings. They did let the dragon escape, and the dragon is above human intelligence and wisdom. They are capable of opposition research.
No, I'm not saying that you're making the wrong choice, because if your mother opens the portal and lets Demogorgon in the world, that is clearly bad news for everyone. I'm just trying to make sure that you're aware of the consequences that would be at the front of your
character's mind. I've made that mistake before. A player made a bargain with Vinru, the goddess of storms, to escape the plane of water, and Vinru followed through and did what she promised to do, and then waited a year for the player to fulfill her end of the bargain. When it became clear that the player was never going to do that, Vinru destroyed a city that the character cared about. And the player felt like that action was out of line because they had not read the situation and understood the threat to be at that level. And I explained it, but it kind of doesn't matter because the player was also right. They would have made different choices if they had understood the world and its mythology in the way that the character understood the mythology. Because the player doesn't live in a Greek mythology world where Zeus can just destroy the city of Salmones overnight because of the actions of one. You want surprise, wonder, and mystery in your world? So do I. And the players are playing a game, and they need to understand the world in the same way the characters do in order to play that game, especially when they're playing in a sandbox and half of this is being improvised right in front of them. Nemesis are one of the most powerful world threads in your sandbox toolkit. They start as a reaction to something the players have done, but now they're creating threads of their own, and the players aren't the only ones moving the story forward. In many ways, they are your character at the table, a vessel for you to pour your cruelty, your malice, and your will to dominate all life, for the entertainment of your friends. As cool as you may want to make this character, remember at the end of the campaign, their job is to give the players at least a fair shot at defeating them. So how do you do it? In the early games, levels 1 through 4, if the players give you an opportunity for an enemy to escape, take it. Don't bring them back in the next adventure, city, dungeon, whatever. Wait until one of the characters is alone and vulnerable. Use the Nemesis to threaten loved ones and connections. And then once each major tier of play, connect whatever the active thread is back to the plot of the Nemesis. I've had success a few times now, giving the Nemesis a minion who's kind of a flip-flop ally of both the players and the Nemesis, depending on who's got the better deal. I got this from Kane in Final Fantasy II, or I guess 4, depending on when you played it. It's hard for the players not to try to turn the minion into an ally when the minion has information that they want and could legitimately help them get whatever the players are trying to do. And you want the Nemesis's actions to be obvious from their consequences, but the Nemesis should never be available and they shouldn't have a clear goal. You want to save that for late game so that you can attach whatever the player's threat is they're chasing right now to whatever the Nemesis is ultimately doing. But you do want the players to have some interaction with the Nemesis, and the minion can help you do that indirectly. That way, if they die, you still got the real Nemesis there in the background, and there's always more minions. You can use them to introduce new threads that have something to do with your Nemesis when you're ready to tie the players back to that and switch gears. You can use them as a penultimate villain, or even, although I'd be very careful with this one, do a flip-flop, and it turns out that the minion was actually the true mastermind all along. Who the gods are, how magic works, who the rulers are, how demons, angels, aberrations, undead, and powerful fallen empires fit into your world, that's the Dungeon Master's primary playground in a sandbox. This is where we can say, this is true. And then the players can riff on that and wonder what else must be true. Consistency is your best friend here, so they can use your ideas to solve some of their problems or form their own ambitions. It's fine for you to say, you can't just make the hammer of thunderbolts by giving a couple dwarves a bar of gold. You're going to need to do something like go get the heart of a dying star or something. And now the player's on a quest to go get that heart of the dying star. And then when you're ready for it, you can put that information in some dungeon and some adventure where someone knows how to help the player accomplish their goal. You don't need to update every plot, every faction, every time the players do something. You can. I think you can make your world feel more rich and like it's actually a real place with real things that are doing things. And if you want to do that, keeping track of the timelines for their plots on a calendar can help with that. But most of the time you can actually get by without it. You just want to track your world events, the things that the game is going to expect the players to care about eventually. Most of the time it's good enough to give the impression that these other things are out there somewhere doing things. And when the players decide to go, oh yeah, we haven't searched for my mother in 6 months, or what is that cult up to these days? Then you can go decide based on what the characters are following at the moment, what would be useful. What have these things been up to all this time? When people do the same thing week after week, adventure after adventure, even when it's the thing that they love, they get bored of it. It's perfectly normal. It's called habituation. When your players pick a direction, give them the game style that they are anticipating having signed up for. Combat, intrigue, survival, but don't do that same thing next session. Finish up the dungeon if you must, but then switch up gears. The cult is fine for now, but I don't want the players doing another adventure that is kind of this dagger in the dark, skullduggery, hunt down mystery. Maybe we need to find something that is more role play heavy, more light, less investigation, or maybe a kick in the door action adventure kind of thing. So I'm just not going to provide any more information for this thread for a few sessions. As a dungeon master, you are still in control of what information gets provided when. And as a dungeon master, you are free to provide new threads, things that you're interested in. Take things that the players want and tie them to things that you would have fun running. I wouldn't do something that they absolutely hate, but maybe like number 2 or number 3 on their favorite list, just for a change. Let's say that one of your players is a wizard and they want to start a wizarding school, and you decide, well, you're going to have a huge library of books with which to educate your prospective students, and you don't have those. And the player tends to be one of the more theatrical roleplay talky types and has spent the last 2 sessions in town talking with their favorite barkeeper. Well, maybe it's time to interrupt that train of roleplay and say that an ex-adventurer comes in with a sob story about how their last party got totally wiped out by a lich, because you're feeling like it's time for a dungeon crawl.
And that variety keeps the game fresh and interesting. At the very least, they'll have a new story to share with that innkeeper when they get back to town. A sandbox is about giving players the opportunity to discover their characters, follow their own gaming motivations, find their own fun, and weave together a story together at the table with their friends. And one of those friends is you. Because remember, Dungeon Masters, you're a player too. Try to have some fun.
Okay, which one of you wants to talk about sandboxes? Oh, right in the mouth. Dog lips touch my lips. Ew, ew.